Right now, President Trump is on the verge of rolling out one of the most groundbreaking tax plans in modern history, one that could put an extra $5,000 right back into the pockets of hard-working Americans. And let me tell you, Democrats are absolutely losing their minds over it. Trump's latest budget resolution isn't just about trimming government waste, it's about giving the American people what's rightfully theirs. And that's not all. There's also talk of eliminating taxes on tips and overtime, ensuring that every dollar you earn stays where it belongs, with you. But here's the kicker. The left-wing media is scrambling to spin this as some kind of disaster. Why? Because they know that when Americans see real financial relief under Trump, their entire tax and spend narrative crumbles. So what's really in this big, beautiful bill? Why is Washington in full-blown panic mode? And what does Elon Musk have to do with all of this? Stick around because we're about to break it all down. As you know, a new tax refund plan, being called the Doge dividend, is making waves, and for good reason. The concept behind it is simple but revolutionary. Cut wasteful government spending and give the savings back to the American people. The Department of Government Efficiency has been aggressively working to eliminate fraud and waste from the federal budget. So far, they've already slashed over $55 billion, with an ambitious goal of cutting $2 trillion by 2026. Under the Doge dividend proposal, 20% of every dollar saved would be returned to American taxpayers in the form of a tax refund. If the math holds, this would mean a $5,000 tax refund for every tax-paying American, a move that could reshape the economy and redefine how budget cuts impact everyday citizens. According to the proposal document, there are 4 key reasons behind the Doge dividend. 1. Correcting past injustices done to taxpayers. 2. Sharing the benefits of cost-cutting directly with Americans. 3. Boosting tax morale, making people feel more positive about where their money goes. 4th, encouraging workforce participation in 2025. And perhaps the most significant part? Since this refund is funded entirely by budget cuts rather than new spending, it won't be inflationary, a major concern for many Americans in recent years. This plan could mark a dramatic shift in how Washington handles taxpayer dollars, and it's already sparking intense debate on both sides of the aisle. Not everyone is on board with the Doge dividend, and the backlash from mainstream media outlets, especially CNN, has been swift. Critics are doing everything they can to undermine the proposal, but Trump's allies aren't backing down. One of the most vocal defenders of the plan is Stephen Miller, a longtime political advisor to President Trump. In a heated exchange, Miller pushed back hard against CNN's narrative, arguing that the American people are tired of seeing their tax dollars wasted, misused, and essentially stolen. The American people are exhausted and tired of watching their tax dollars be corruptly spent, abused, wasted, and in every sense, robbed and stolen from them. This president, for the first time in history, is committed to restoring accountability at every level of the federal government. When pressed further, Miller challenged the network's reluctance to support budget cuts. You may assert there's no waste in the Pentagon. You may assert there's no waste in Treasury. You may assert there's no waste. Why are you not celebrating these cuts? If you agree there is waste, if you agree there is abuse, if you agree there is corruption, why are you not celebrating the cuts, the reforms that are being instituted? At one point, the CNN anchor tried to rein in the conversation, telling Miller to calm down, but he didn't hold back. You are clearly trying to debate me, and I will be as excited as I want to be about the fact that we are saving Americans billions of dollars, that we are ending the theft, waste, grift, and corruption, and that we are stopping American taxpayer dollars from subsidizing a rogue federal bureaucracy that has been relentlessly weaponized against the American people. Miller closed with a pointed message to the media. You may not care about this issue. Your colleagues may not care about this issue, but we care about this issue. People care about this issue. The American public overwhelmingly supports what President Trump is doing. This serves as a powerful reminder that making America great again is no longer just a slogan. It's a reality that's unfolding in real time. Americans gave President Trump a clear mandate to fix the country, and that's exactly what's happening. But despite broad public support for his policies, the mainstream media continues to push its progressive agenda, working overtime to distort the facts. Elon Musk weighed in on this very issue, pointing out the hypocrisy of Trump's critics in a statement just recently. When these attacks occur, the thing that they're accusing the administration of is what they are guilty of. They're saying that things are being done unconstitutionally, but what they are doing is unconstitutional. They are guilty of the crime of which they accuse us. That's always the first thing they do. Musk didn't stop there. He called out the media's dishonesty and manipulation, saying, "He's in violation of the Constitution. They don't even know what they're talking about. Well, it's just a con job. It's a big con job, and they're so bad for the country, so dangerous and so bad. And the media is so bad. When I watch MSNBC, which I don't watch much, but you have to watch the enemy on occasion, the level of arrogance and cheating, they're just horrible people." It's a sentiment that resonates with millions of Americans who are fed up with the media's hypocrisy. And with trust in legacy outlets at an all-time low, their declining ratings tell the whole story. People just aren't buying it anymore. While mainstream media outlets continue to struggle with sinking ratings, there's one name that's only gaining momentum: Donald Trump. The former president and the Republican Party haven't just maintained their support. They've completely reshaped the electorate. Here's what the numbers show. Back in 2017, Democrats outnumbered Republicans in the electorate by 5 points. By 2021, when Joe Biden took office, that gap had grown to 6 points. Now, in February 2025, the tide has turned. Republicans have taken the lead, holding a +2 advantage over Democrats. This shift isn't just about party loyalty. It's about a fundamental transformation in how Americans see their political future. Trump and the Republican Party have not only won over former Democrats and independents, but they've also brought in new voters who lean conservative. When you combine that with the unwavering unity of the Republican base behind Trump, you get a political movement that defies traditional expectations, one that has even pushed Trump's approval rating into positive territory after years of being consistently negative during his first term. As Trump himself might say, he's doing it his way. And the big takeaway? Trump hasn't just rebuilt the Republican Party, he's rebuilding America. Democrats are still struggling to come to terms with this massive political shift, but for everyday Americans, Trump's agenda is a hit. Border security, widely supported. Mass deportations, gaining traction. Prioritizing domestic issues over global ones, a major win. Cutting government waste, people are all for it. A $5,000 tax refund, needless to say, it's incredibly popular. And that's exactly why Trump dominated the 2024 election. He didn't just win. He swept every single swing state, became the first Republican in 20 years to win the popular vote, and managed to shift all 50 states to the right. Now, with record-breaking approval ratings, he's proving that Americans aren't just supporting his policies, they're demanding them. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders are scrambling to control the narrative. Just this morning, Chuck Schumer tried to push back on Trump's aggressive cost-cutting measures, saying, "Of course there's some wasteful spending, but you don't use a meat axe and cut everything. We need to look at each program, go through Congress, and see what's wasteful and move to eliminate it. And what's not wasteful, but very much needed, should remain." Translation? They're panicking. Because for the first time in decades, a president is actually following through on promises to shrink government waste, put Americans first, and return tax dollars where they belong, in the pockets of hard-working people. That statement is a perfect example of why so many Americans are fed up with the manipulation and dishonesty coming from the left. Chuck Schumer is pushing a completely false narrative, claiming that Trump is recklessly slashing the federal budget. In reality, Trump is targeting wasteful spending, not essential programs. And Schumer's argument that Congress should be the one responsible for cutting waste completely ignores the fact that Congress is the reason the waste exists in the first place. in the first. Let's not forget, Schumer has been in Congress for over 40 years. And how much waste has he eliminated? Zero. That's exactly why the Department of Government Efficiency is stepping in, identifying fraud, cutting unnecessary spending, and ensuring that money goes back to the American people where it belongs. Because let's be honest, your hard-earned tax dollars are better off in your pocket than being funneled into the hands of corrupt Washington bureaucrats. The reaction from the left-wing media to the Doge audits and the proposed Doge dividend has been nothing short of a meltdown. Now that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are floating the idea of giving $5,000 back to American taxpayers, the media hysteria has kicked into overdrive. It's a familiar pattern. For 4 years under Joe Biden, the government engaged in unchecked spending, extending pandemic-level fiscal policies long after the crisis had ended. Despite the skyrocketing national debt, the media remained largely silent, justifying every spending spree. But the moment Trump suggests a plan to cut wasteful spending, make government more efficient, and return some of that saved money to the people, it's suddenly portrayed as reckless and dangerous. Now, the same media outlets that ignored Biden's fiscal mismanagement are suddenly concerned about inflation, the national debt, and economic consequences, all because the proposal comes from Trump. The double standard couldn't be clearer. One recent exchange perfectly captured this hypocrisy. A CNN anchor, visibly rattled by the idea of Trump's plan, lost his temper on air, even going so far as to threaten to cut off Trump's spokesperson's mic just so he could continue his rant without interruption. The moment resembled something straight out of state-run propaganda, not a fair and balanced news broadcast. A heated exchange on CNN put the network's approach to journalism on full display, as a host openly injected personal opinions and even threatened to cut off the microphone of a guest representing former President Donald Trump. The discussion centered around the Doge audits and the proposed Doge dividend, which would return $5,000 to tax-paying Americans using a portion of government spending cuts. The CNN host pushed back, arguing that the U.S. is $36 trillion in debt and that any savings should go entirely toward paying down the deficit rather than being redistributed to taxpayers. James Fishback, the CEO of Azoria, defended the proposal, emphasizing that the dividend is designed to incentivize Americans to identify waste, fraud, and abuse, ultimately reducing government spending and narrowing the deficit. He also questioned the media's sudden concern over debt, pointing out that there was no such panic when the U.S. sent $350 billion to Ukraine or when some cities allocated $7,000 a month for migrants. So now that President Trump wants to return $5,000 to hardworking Americans, it's suddenly a crisis? Fishback challenged. Where was this urgency when billions were being handed out elsewhere? The conversation quickly escalated, with the CNN host calling the plan a Ponzi scheme and insisting that the U.S. simply does not have the money for such a proposal. Frustrated by the exchange, he eventually threatened to mute Fishback's microphone just to get the last word, a moment that underscored the network's growing hostility toward the idea of giving tax dollars back to the people who paid them. James Fishback wasn't pulling any punches when he joined CNN to discuss the Doge dividend plan. Despite the host's obvious frustration, Fishback remained firm in his argument. The government's spending priorities have been a fraud against the American people. We have to send the money back, he explained. Save 20%, put the rest toward paying down the national debt and narrowing the deficit. He didn't hold back on where taxpayer dollars have gone instead. Billions sent to Ukraine, funding for the Green New Deal, and billions more allocated to the migrant crisis, all while healthcare and education at home remain underfunded. But according to Fishback, that changes with Trump's leadership. President Trump is delivering on his promise of major government reform, he said, and Americans support the Doge dividend plan. The CNN host, visibly agitated, tried to argue that the plan was irresponsible because the country was already drowning in debt. Fishback was quick to call out the hypocrisy. "Oh, so now you care about debt?" he asked. "Now all of a sudden, balancing the budget is a priority?" He pointed out that when Biden's spending drove the national debt to nearly $40 trillion, there was no outcry from the media. When Biden falsely claimed he was cutting the deficit, networks like CNN parroted the talking points, even as the Congressional Budget Office projected that his spending proposals would push the national debt to nearly $40 trillion by 2030 or 2035. When Biden was running his "I'm cutting the deficit" scam, none of these Democrat anchors said a damn thing, Fishback noted. They told us his plans were paid for, even though he was running a $1 to $2 trillion deficit every single year. James Fishback wasn't holding back when he called out the hypocrisy on full display. "These people are a complete joke," he said bluntly. He pointed out how, when Biden was ramping up pandemic-level spending and pushing through another round of stimulus checks, plenty of experts warned about inflation. But instead of addressing those concerns, the media ran cover. They kept trotting out Janet Yellen to reassure Americans, "Oh, inflation's not going to be a real risk. It'll be transitory, just a little blip on the radar," Fishback recalled. And how did that turn out? Now, with inflation having wreaked havoc on the economy, those same media figures are suddenly positioning themselves as champions of fiscal responsibility. Fishback wasn't buying it. These left-wing CNN anchors want to pretend they're the fiscally responsible ones? Give me a break. He argued that the real reason behind their outrage over the Doge dividend had little to do with economics and everything to do with politics. This idea can actually work, and that's what scares them the most, he explained. "I think what really has them panicking is the thought of Donald Trump sending a check to every American with his name on it, because they know that would boost his approval and favorability ratings." Fishback then tackled the biggest question in the room. Wouldn't sending $5,000 to every American cause inflation? His answer? It depends on how you do it. If you do it the way the Democrats did, print untold trillions of dollars, flood the economy with artificial stimulus, and expand the money supply, then, yeah, of course, you're going to get inflation. He broke it down in simple terms. If you have 5 apples and $10, each apple costs $2. But if you print more money, let's say you double it to $20, now you've got the same 5 apples, but each one costs $4. That's how inflation works. Fishback's argument was clear. Fiscal responsibility isn't about pretending to care when it's politically convenient. If the media really cared about inflation, they would have spoken up long before now. James Fishback laid out his argument with sharp clarity. If Trump takes a different approach, cutting waste, balancing the budget, and actually saving money, then putting cash back in Americans' pockets isn't some reckless stimulus. It's more like a tax credit or refund. The American taxpayer has been forced to fund a system that wastes their money on all kinds of nonsense, he explained. At the very least, people should be entitled to get some of that money back, and nobody's saying it should come from printing more money. Instead, Fishback emphasized, it should come from actual savings, cutting government waste and redirecting those funds back to the people. At the end of the day, it all depends on how the plan is implemented, he said. And if you need an example, just look at Trump's first-term tax cuts. He pointed out that those cuts lowered corporate taxes and put more money in the hands of businesses and individuals, stimulating the economy without triggering inflation. And that's the key question, right? Fishback continued. Did it cause inflation? Number, it didn't. But instead of engaging in a real discussion, he argued, the media is dodging the conversation entirely. For decades, they didn't care about deficits, government spending, or inflation, but now, all of a sudden, they're so concerned, he scoffed. Yeah, miss me with that nonsense. As for the Doge dividend, Fishback suggested a strategic approach. Maybe hold off for now, he said. Keep cutting waste, balance the budget, maybe even hit a surplus. Then, once that first goal is met, it would make sense to talk about returning money to the hardest working Americans. That's not bad policy, he concluded. That's long overdue policy. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation surged and remains above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. Some experts worry that issuing direct payments to Americans could only make matters worse. This is certainly the wrong time for any kind of consumer stimulus, said Judge Glock, Director of Research and Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Inflation is still elevated, and any additional stimulus would only make it worse. However, Elaine Camark, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, argued that the amount of money saved under Doge may not be large enough to trigger inflation. The discussion around direct payments comes as Congress considers whether to extend provisions from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act later this year. That debate is already raising concerns about the deficit, noted Alex Muresianu, a senior policy analyst at the Tax Foundation. This would be another huge policy to try and squeeze in, he said. But James Fishback sees the Doge dividend differently. Rather than a new government handout, he argues it's simply a way to refund money Americans have already paid in taxes. He also pushed back on the idea that a $5,000 payment would automatically fuel inflation. Citing a 2019 CNBC survey, Fishback noted that most Americans would likely use the money to pay off debt, save, or invest toward long-term goals like retirement, none of which would drive up prices. Every American has both the mechanism and the incentive to report waste, fraud, and abuse with Doge, Fishback said. When we give every American skin in the game, we'll save even more of our hard-earned tax dollars. That's all for this one. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.